Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and I just wanted to do a real quick video about the most recent discussions about crit itemization changes for the AD carry role, which should happen around patch 9.3 is what they're speculating, although it could be 9.4. I saw some other content creators also doing videos about this, so I figured I'd jump on board, give you my 2 cents. I've had a few people asking me about it yesterday on stream. So let's go ahead and go through it here. Now, I did do a really quick preview, and I'll put this Google Doc in the description to the video as well. Just remember that a lot of this is speculative. They might change their minds again. They were floating around some different ideas back in December about some of these things, but this seems to be a bit more developed and fleshed out than those ideas, so I think this is pretty close to what they might ship on 9.3, but they may still make some adjustments. It hasn't even been on the PBE yet, so just keep that in mind. When it does get released, I will, of course, cover it in depth in the patch notes video. And when they put it on the PBE, I might do an additional video about it if it's substantially different from what they have right now. But I will do full coverage when it comes out, when it's the final version as well. This is just to give you a taste of what's coming down the line, just to get you thinking about it. So as always, remember, if you enjoy this content, be sure like and subscribe. It helps out a ton, helps new people find the channel, and it will also let you know whenever I release new videos. And be sure to check out the rest of the offerings on the channel as well. I do patch notes, tier list, champion guides, coaching sessions. I stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So there's a lot of content on the channel for you to check out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So the new Phantom Dancer is going to be 30% attack speed, 25% crit, 7% movement speed, and upon taking damage that would reduce your health below 30%, gain a shield that absorbs 280 damage for 5 seconds. This is kind of like a Hex Drinker, but it's for all damage, not just magic damage, but it still has some crit and attack speed on it. I think this is probably the worst of the new items. It's pretty terrible compared to what the current version is. If we look at the current Phantom Dancer, it has 45% attack speed, so it's losing 15 attack speed, 15% attack speed, which is 15 times 25. Okay, so that's 375 gold value. It's also losing 5% crit, which is an additional 200 gold value. Crit's about 40 gold each. And it's costing an additional 100, so it's going to 2,800 cost. Look at this, right? So it's going to loses the 5 crit, and it's going up to 2,800. So that's plus an additional 100. So you're losing 675 gold of offensive stats off of this thing, right? And that's a really big deal, especially the critical strike and attack speed, because these are the things that are going to compound and make your critical strike on other items much, much better, because you're going to have more attacks, more chances to crit, and then, of course, critical chance itself is going to give you more chances to crit. Now you get this shield that blocks 280 damage, so we lost 675 value there. The shield gives back most of that value, so health is worth 2.4 each. I believe it's 2.6. So I forgot what the number was before. It was like 650 or 750 or whatever. So you basically, you get that back in terms of raw health, but you got to remember that that health isn't always there. It only happens if you if it triggers below 90 seconds, and it only lasts for a temporary amount of time, and it has a cooldown, so it's not always available. So whenever that's not online, then you're losing about 700 gold value off the item, which is about 25% of the item's value, which is huge. But the main thing that sucks about this is it's losing its other passes, and this is where it really gains a lot of its power. It's losing 12% damage reduction against the enemy it's closest to you, and it loses that additional 7% movement speed and ghosting, which does allow you to walk through other champions and allows you to walk through minions as well, which is very, very valuable in the laning phase, particularly for split pushing champions. This is something that was really useful on, someone like Yasuo or on Vayne. A lot of times would get this item, and so that's a huge, huge hit. I mean, if we think about it, if somebody has 2,000 health, in kind of the mid to late game, blocking 12% of all damage from one target is almost the equivalent of 240 damage being blocked, or getting an extra 240 equivalency in health, right? Which is exactly what this is. Now, this would be, well, this is 280, but this is going to be a lot more valuable if someone has much lower health than that, but you're still losing a lot of the movement speed. You did have 12%, now you're only going to have a flat 7. You're trading quite a bit of your offense stats to get this defensive shield, which was already, you know, like I said, maybe that shield is a little bit better than the 12% damage reduction, since the shield applies to all targets incoming and not just the one target that you're fighting. But I feel like it's a lot worse. You're just sacrificing so much offense for the defense, and this is what made this a really unique item. This is a great dueling item for people that wanted to crit. And it was already niche. Most people didn't get this. It was, you know, historically much worse than Rapid Fire and Static Shiv combined with Infinity Edge, because it doesn't have their little passives that stack together with the Energized. So I think that's a pretty poor change. We'll see if it goes through. You know, they were saying they were trying to give people a more defensive option as crit. I don't even think this is that much more defensive as Spectral Wall. And why? Like, I know some people complain that, like, AD carries are too squishy or whatever. I'm fine with them being squishy. I just want to be able to kill people. Like, I think it's okay if you have a role that is, you know, squishy and based on your agility and your dexterity. And I think that's what AD carries should be. It should be you have to position well. You have to learn how to kite. You have to learn how to attack move. Like, those are the key things that distinguish AD carries from most other roles. You know, mages, a lot of times, or assassins, they just press all their buttons and all in, boom, and it's all about, you know, getting that first hit, right? Being very tactical and, like, jumping out and making sure that you know, one-shot somebody. AD carries much more. It should happen over time. You should have to position and land several auto attacks. It just shouldn't be, like, 15 auto attacks to kill a squishy target out there. So, you know, I think that's the fantasy of AD carries, is being able to position, to hunt people down, to outplay people, right? Like with Vayne or Lucian or Ezreal. I think those are pretty good designs where they have that mobility, they have the agility to outplay people, but they still have to land, you know, multiple hits when they're in a healthy state of balance. They still have to land multiple hits and kill someone over time, not instantly, with the exception of Lucian right now. Or Ezreal if he's mega fed with some of his Qs dealing like 75% of somebody's health. But I think that's what people want from AD carries. And so I just don't think that they need a defensive option that's going to give them shields or give them extra health. I mean, GA is already there for that. It already gives them some AD and it gives them the GA passive. I think that's fine. So I don't think you need a crit item that gives you too much defense. So I don't like the idea of where this is trying to go, and then statistically, I just don't think it's a very good item to begin with anymore. I think the old Phantom Dancer was better for the champions that wanted to use it. And I think that's okay also to just have an item that only a handful of champions want to use. Not every champion needs to be able to use every single item. Okay. So what they're doing with the rest of these items, for the most part, is they are lowering the critical strike on all of them to 25%. So this is going to create cleaner numbers. So it's 25%, you get a second one, it's 50%, you know, you get another one, it's 75%. So I think that's pretty good progression. I was always saying that I thought they should do this with the current Infinity Edge, so you don't have that weird system where it's like you get to 60% after 2 items, and then if you go for a third crit item, then you get to 120% crit, which just feels really awkward and bad. So I like doing it in increments of 25%. It's just a lot easier to understand. It's a lot easier to sort of just at a glance understand the value. Okay, so Rapid Fire Cannon, they're dropping it, I believe, by just the 5%. It has the same attack speed as previously. Yes, so they're just dropping 5% attack speed. So that's losing 200 gold value off the item, though. Pretty much, and the rest of it's the same. So you still get your Energized by moving around, does the same damage, 35% increased range, and deals 60 to 140 damage. Deals 60 to 140 damage. And your attacks Energized 25% faster. I think that was still in this version, right? Yes. So it's the same deal, you just lose 200 gold value off of it, which kind of sucks. Right? Now, the reason that they're doing this probably is because they are changing Infinity Edge back to sort of what it was before, a nerfed version of what it was before. So we'll talk about that here in a second, but you're basically losing 200 gold. So this is effectively costing about 3,000 gold to get the same value out of it that you got before, which, once again, is not amazing. Static Shiv, so it's getting an extra 5% attack speed over its sort of brethren here. So that's, you know, about an extra 125 gold value. and then it's doing the same thing. It'll critically strike on up to 5 targets and still does 60 to 40, which I believe is what it currently does as well. 60 to 140, yeah. It's the same deal. It's actually literally the exact same thing that it is right now. Shiv Lightning can critically strike, dealing that damage. If they keep that, it can critically strike. Okay, so these two items historically have had a lot of synergy together because this gives 25% more energized attacks. This counts as an energized attack, so that means that you end up getting these specialized attacks much faster, and then, of course, you get the extra auto attack range of 35%. It does this magic damage, which is on hit. That part cannot critically strike, but the rest of it does critically strike from a long distance over time, and that critical strike can get modified by Infinity Edge to do 225% damage on the lightning that spreads around to everybody. So that's kind of the really cool like buildup of these items, is that, you know, when you get them both, then you have like this like super attack that comes out every now and then from long range. Now they had talked about nerfing damn it, why am I blanking on the name? Stormrazor. Because that could be something that could potentially be really overpowered, but like with that build, right? Because you're going to get a guaranteed crit on your static Shiv that applies all of those strikes. And then whenever you get Infinity Edge plus Stormrazor, we'll talk about that here in a second, that seems like that could be really powerful depending on if the Infinity Edge overwrites the current Stormrazor. So I think they're going to have to rework Stormrazor in this equation, because it says that your attacks are supposed to critically strike for somewhere between 140 to 200 or to 200% critical strike, but then Infinity Edge currently is worded as though all critical strikes deal 225%. So it should say deal an additional 25%, and then it could work with Stormrazor. But right now it looks like it would overwrite that. So I think they're going to have to resolve that. So I think they had toyed with nerfing Stormrazor or changing it in some way. And I think that would be a good idea. Stormrazor is just a really unhealthy item balance-wise. Okay. So anyways, this item's the same. This item is slightly nerfed. Okay, same deal. Now keep in mind, back in the heyday when Rapid Fire and Infinity Edge were so strong, part of that was also you had Warlord's Bloodlust, which was something that also worked on an energized system. And I think Fleet works on that too, but it's not as good as Warlords used to be in terms of that crit. I'm pretty sure that Warlords used to heal you a lot more. Okay, yeah, it becomes energized. So, you know, that does have synergy with Fleet Footwork as well, Rapid Fire Cannon, so you would end up getting more Fleet attacks, which ultimately would end up giving you that heal and that extra little bit of movement speed. What did Warlords? Okay, so Warlords used to be, gives you this, energized attacks, heals you for 5 to 40% of your AD based on your level. So it could be up to 30% of your AD. So I guess this is 30% of your bonus AD, not your total AD. 30% move speed, which is pretty close to this. 20% bonus movement speed for 1 second versus 30% for whatever shorter length of time. But if it critically strikes, it heals you for a crazy amount, like 2 plus whatever the bonus critical strike damage is. That's what it was. Okay, so if you got a crit, you got a super heal off of it, versus Fleet, it doesn't matter if you get a crit or not. So that was kind of the major thing back in the day with Warlords. So the items still won't be as good as they were, so it's not like a full revert because the runes have changed and sort of the meta's changed and different items around these champions have changed. Champions like Janna have been nerfed significantly. And Janna was really good with this because obviously if you have critical strike, the bonus AD off of Janna's shield gives you extra critical strike damage, right? So if you get that 40 damage off of Janna's shield, you critically strike with that with an Infinity Edge, it used to do 100 extra damage instead of just the 40 AD. So you'd have 2.5%, right? So 80, then an additional 50% for 100. So that was the really strong synergy, was with champions, specifically Janna, with Ardent Censer also being much, much stronger. Back in Season 7, that's what made Critical Strike AD carries feel so oppressive to a lot of people, is it was like Ardent Censer, it was Janna, it was runes like Warlord's Bloodlust back then, and it was the pre-nerf Rapid Fire, Static Shiv, and Infinity Edge. So all of those things have been nerfed. So we're not going to go back to the AD carry Gory heyday, I think. And they're being a little on the cautious side, I think, with this. They're not considering how much of the rest of the meta has been nerfed already in respect to these things. But they're basically limping back into the meta here. They'll be a little bit better. Runin's Hurricane is exactly the same. So it still does 40% attack speed and gives critical strike and has these extra things. So I think Runin's is by far the best one right now because it's not getting much of a nerf. It is losing 5% off its crit, but it has more attack speed than these other items at this point. Now it doesn't have this synergy though. It doesn't give you the Rapid Fire Cannon plus the Static Shiv plus the synergy with Fleet Footwork, right? But it does still have very good synergy with things like Blade the Ruined King. And then also remember these bolts can critically strike as well. So it is still very good if you get critical strike items with it as well. So I think that, you know, champions that want to get Runin's Hurricane like Twitch, like Jinx, will be in a pretty good spot off of those changes. Now this is perhaps the most interesting one and sort of most daring one if this comes through. I don't remember if the old school Essence Reaver used to be something like this or what. I guess I could look it up. Let me see. Because there was Essence Reaver, I think, was something back in the day before its current iteration. But having another item that has critical strike and flat AD on it is pretty bold, other than Essence Reaver. I don't think that's ever really existed. Old Essence Reaver may have done that. I'm trying to remember. Why is it taking so long to load this up? I don't get it. Sorry, I don't know why that's taking so long. But anyways, I don't think that it used to be... Okay, here we go. Yeah, I don't know why it's taking so long. Let me see what it used to be. Okay, it changed here. 20% cooldown. Old effects. Okay, it did... Okay, it used to be an item that... So it used to give 70 attack damage, 20 critical strike... 60 attack damage, 25% critical strike. How much did it used to cost? Total cost reduced to 30. Okay, so it used to be 3,400 at that time. Gain so much additional cooldown reduction based on your critical strike. Okay, so this is just giving you flat 20% cooldown reduction. And then critical strikes restore 3% of your mana versus... This always restores 1.5% of your mana. So if you have more than 50% critical strike, this is going to be a drop-off in your total mana restored. But if you have 50% or less, this is going to be better than your total mana restored. So it costs 200 less. You lose 10. Is it 10? It was 10 attack damage, right? It's pretty significant. So 10 attack damage is 350 value. This is 35 gold per attack damage, but you do gain 5% critical strike, which is 200 value. So you're losing 150 gold value right now, and you could gain 20% cooldown reduction. Okay, so if you have one other item that gave you 25% cooldown reduction, you would end up, or 25% critical strike, then you would end up with 25% cooldown reduction. So you're also losing, in effect, typically if you get this like first item and then you get something else like a Runin's Hurricane, if you're like Ash and you went Essence Reaver plus Runin's Hurricane, then you would end up with 25% cooldown reduction. So you're losing 5% cooldown reduction also, which is 130. So basically, in many scenarios, after you have two items, you're losing 280 gold value, but it's also 200 cheaper. So you're losing 80 gold, but it's better as a single item, I think. Yeah, because you'd have 20% cooldown reduction if you rush it instead of just a flat 0 just a flat 10% cooldown reduction. Okay, from old Essence Reaver. So not that much different from the old one. Oh, marginally different. It's worse in some cases. If you rush it as first item, it'll be a little bit better. So if you rush this first on someone like Ashe, would be the best person I could think of with this. Or maybe Sivir, then it's a little bit better if you get it first item. It's a little bit worse at 2 items, and then it just kind of evens out after that, or just maybe it's slightly worse overall. I don't know. It's just awkward. It's about the same, and if you remember this, like, pretty much nobody got this item back in the day. So it was basically, I think it was just like Ashe would get this sometimes, and like maybe sometimes Sivir would get it. I can't really remember. That was a while ago. But I remember that most people didn't get this item because it was just way better just to get Infinity Edge plus Static Shiv, Rapid Fire Cannon pretty much every game. So I could see maybe Xayah liking something like this. Like someone who doesn't want... The problem is this doesn't have attack speed on it. So someone who wants attack speed... or who doesn't care about attack speed, I mean to say, but likes the cooldown reduction, but would rather, so someone who would rather have flat AD rather than attack speed and would really benefit heavily from the cooldown reduction. Jhin is someone who comes to mind, maybe. I would have to see what the conversion rate is on Jhin. I'm not going to look right now, but just to see if something like Rapid Fire Cannon or Essence Reaver would be stronger on him. They have the same critical strike. This has the cooldown reduction, though. This has the AD. That has the attack speed of... that has move speed, which is nice. That has the 30% attack speed. I don't remember. Let me just look real quick. What does attack speed convert over to? So what would 30% attack speed convert into? 25% crit per 1% bonus attack speed. Okay, so 30% attack speed, 7.5% crit. Critical strikes deal 50% AD bonus damage. And he gains this much 0.4% bonus damage based on your critical strike chance. I don't know. I feel like maybe he would like that. The problem is, like, the Rapid Fire Cannon is particularly good on him just because that extra range, so you get your 4th shot off. It's very, very strong. And having the 4th guaranteed crit shot for things like Static Shiv, which can crit also. I just feel like he's still going to want... right now, as of right now, he's still going to definitely get Storm Racer first, then probably Rapid Fire Cannon, then probably Infinity Edge after that. I just don't think it's going to fit into his build. Ashe really likes the cooldown reduction, the flat AD, and the crit. She's going to have to get Hurricane still. I just don't know. Maybe she gets this instead of Blade of the Ruined King. But then when does she get Infinity Edge? So maybe because she's going Hurricane. Maybe champions who want to go Hurricane because they're not going to be on board with the charges thing. They're not going to be on board with the energized attacks. If you're going Hurricane, that's not happening. So maybe people who go Hurricane might consider this. So like Ashe, maybe Twitch, although that seems bad on Twitch as well. Like, he doesn't need the cooldown reduction. Jinx doesn't need the cooldown reduction, who also wants to go Hurricane. Like, they'll probably still just go Infinity Edge, Hurricane, Rapid Fire after that or something. I just can't really think of many people that would use this other than, like, maybe Ashe, maybe Sivir. Sivir really does like the mana refund part of it. I don't know. I mean, what would Sivir get? I guess Sivir could get maybe Essence Reaver. It's just like the Static Shiv thing would be so good on her too. She has to get Storm Razor first of all because that item's just OP. So she's got to go Storm Razor and then one crit item and then probably Infinity Edge. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of people aren't going to get this. Spear of Shojin is basically what Essence Reaver is right now. You just lose 5 AD and mana off of it, so that just seems terrible because no one gets Essence Reaver right now anyways. Like, maybe Renekton would still get this. But, yeah, it's just bad. It's just a bad design. A lot of people, I mean, just nobody's going to get that. Is it cheaper than it is right now? No, it's still 300 right now. 75, 20, 300 mana. 70, 20, no mana. Yeah, it just seems bad. I don't know. You're just, like, randomly losing, like, whatever, like, 300 gold value or something off the item. Yeah, so that just seems terrible. Infinity Edge. Okay, so this one is... This is going to make or break these changes. Okay, so they have either kept the other items relatively neutral or have weakened them compared to how they used to be back in the day. Now, what they're doing with Infinity Edge is they're bringing it back to its old state, sort of, but now it's 225% damage instead of 200%. Hey, thanks for the sub, Hipster. I appreciate it. So that's a pretty big difference, but I think it's better than the current Infinity Edge. So if we look at, I did a comparison here, you know, 70 AD plus 25% crit ultimately takes you to about the same price, $34.50, right? So it's cost efficient, 100%, pretty much when you buy it. But you get this 225% crit. So is that 225% crit worth losing the 10% true damage? I think so most of the time. So here's what it would look like if you were normally going to hit somebody for 200. If you crit them, you would now deal 450 AD, or like 450 physical damage with your crit. Okay, nice. You get an extra 50 damage there. If you crit them with the current Infinity Edge, then it would be 380 physical damage, and then you get 20 true damage because it converts 10% of your current damage to true damage of just the critical strike amount, I think. Or is it of the total crit? If it's the total crit, that might be a little different. I thought it was just the critical strike damage. Let me find an item here. Okay, well, that doesn't actually build into Infinity Edge. Okay, here we go. When critically striking, converts 10% of critical strike damage to true damage. So I don't think that's the total. I don't think that's the total damage on a critical strike. It's just the extra damage that the critical strike would do. So instead of doing 100% extra damage, it's doing 90% extra damage plus 10% true damage. Without damage modifiers, when critically striking enemy champions with a common basic attack, you do 20% AD as true damage and 180% physical damage. Okay, it actually is that. Okay, okay. So it does apply to the entire critical strike. Okay, well, that makes it a little murkier. So that would be 40 true damage in this case and 360 base damage. So is having 40 true damage more valuable than having... So is 40 true damage more valuable than 90 AD? Basically is what this comes down to. So if someone has 100 armor, 40 true damage would be the equivalent of roughly 80 AD. Right? Or like, yeah, it would be 80 AD because... 80 physical, or 80 physical damage, I should say. Because 80 physical damage, if someone has 100 armor, would get reduced by 50%, which would take it down to 40 total damage. So that is basically what true damage would be there at that point. So if someone has 100 armor, so you're getting an extra 90 physical damage over this version, right? Because it's dealing 360 physical, 40 true. So If they have 100 armor, it would be more beneficial to have this, the 90 AD, because that would be a 40 AD equivalency off of that true damage. What if they have like 125 armor? That starts to get a little sketchier. Just 100 is very easy math because it always reduces by 50%. So I think if the target has something around like between 100 and 150 damage, I didn't do all the math here. But I think that would probably make it worth it. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 120 armor or something like that. So let's see, 100 divided by 120. Let me see. That's one. No, it's not correct. 100. I'm trying to remember the formula for it. It's like 100. Let me look at. I'll just look at it now that I keep saying I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna do this, but then I go and do it. Oh, okay, it's 100 divided by whatever that number is. Okay, so 100 divided by 120. I just did that, didn't I? %83 reduction. That's not correct off of that. Because 100... Oh, no, you add 100 onto it. Yeah, because if it's 100 armor, it's 100 plus 100... divided by, wait, is that right? Divided by 2, 50% reduction. 100 over armor. I don't know why I'm zoning out on this. I used to know like how to do this off the back of my hand here, but anyways, whatever. I'm tired. I'm not gonna go through it. Basically, I think it's safe to say that if the champion has 100 armor or less, this is going to be beneficial. Okay, so against squishier champions, this new Infinity Edge is going to do more damage than it did before. But against tankier champions, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 armor or something, 120 plus armor, I think that the old Infinity Edge is going to be more beneficial. So that's pretty much how it goes. Now, how much more beneficial? At 100 armor, it wasn't that much. You're basically doing the equivalent of like 10% more or like 10 more damage, which is, you know, when you would normally be hitting for 400. You know, we're talking like 2.5% more total damage, right? If you're doing 10 more damage than the current Infinity Edge would do. So it's not that much better. It's not that much better. It's only 2.5% more damage. And you got to keep in mind that you're giving up some critical strike because the current Infinity Edge, if you get a Zeal item first, they have 60% critical strike on them. You're getting double that. So, or they have 30% critical strike on them. You're getting double that to total 60. So you're basically having 30% crit. And I believe they both have 70 AD, right? Yeah, the current version has 70 also. So you would typically be getting 30% crit. Now you're only getting 25% crits. That's 200 gold extra that you're paying for this. So 200 divided by 3,400 because you're losing that much gold in efficiency. So basically what it is you're losing 5.9% of the value of the item in most standard cases where you have one completed Zeal item and one Infinity Edge. So like Hurricane plus Infinity Edge, because you're losing 5%. You're actually losing 10% crit total if you have 2 items. Off of just 1 item, I guess this has 0% crit. But off of 2 items, you're actually losing 10% crit. So that's even more valuable. That's 400 gold value. Yes, that's 11.8%. So in a standard scenario where you have Infinity Edge plus 1 other completed Zeal item, you're losing 10% crit because you're only going to have, in most scenarios, you're going to have one of those Zeal items is going to give you 25%. Your new Infinity Edge is going to give you 25%. That's 50% crit. With this current one, you would have had 60% crit. And so you're losing 11.8% total value on the item. and you're only gaining, as we just saw right here, you're gaining like 2.5% against a 100 armor target. Now, if it's even a squishier champ, so if it's like a 50 armor target, if it's a 50 armor target, then the difference would be, let's see, 90 AD, 40 true, 50 armor targets, only going to block 25% of that, so 90 times 0.75. So you're dealing 67.5 damage instead of 40 damage there. So that would be gaining you an extra 27.5 damage instead of the 10 that we talked about before. So gaining 27.5. I guess that's not the equivalent of AD, but you're basically gaining 27.5 extra damage there instead. So it's like, I don't know. It's like you're gaining 27.5 extra damage on your crit at the price of basically losing almost 12% efficiency and cost on the item. Oh, I remember what I did. So it's 27.5 divided by the initial hit of 400. So you're gaining 6.9% extra damage at the cost of 11.9% extra crit. So yeah, I don't think that's worth it. I don't think that's worth it because you're losing all that extra crit. And if you get a third crit item, you would be at 100% crit at that point, right? Like you'll be at 120% crit, so you're overdoing it, but it would still be, you know, full 100% crit. Whereas if you get Infinity Edge plus 2 other Zeal items, you're only at 75% crit. So then you're losing 25% of the value that you could have had if you had the current iteration of the Infinity Edge. So that's definitely not going to be worth it cost-wise. Yeah, I mean, I had thought this was going to be pretty good, but after like running through this math a little bit here, it seems really bad. Comparatively, it only gets worse as you complete the full static Shiv and rapid fire cannon with Infinity Edge. It's a lot worse. Now, yeah, like once again, the crit is going to be a little bit better against squishies, right? You're doing 27.5 extra damage on a crit of a 50 armor target. Keep in mind, like most AD carries are probably going to be clocking in somewhere close to 50 armor in the mid game, even without buying any armor items, just off of runes and their base armor. So it's not going to get much better than that. So 27.5 is the rosy scenario, and you would actually end up doing less damage to tanks. And you're losing a boatload of crit. At 2 Zeal items, you're losing 10% crit. At 3 Zeal items, you're losing 25% crit. It costs the same amount, you have the same AD. So there are some... If you rush this item as a first item, which you still probably will not want to do, yes, it is a lot better because it's going to have 25% crit right off the bat, whereas the current Infinity Edge has 0% crit right off the bat, right? So that's like the most valuable case scenario is if you rush this absolutely first item, or if you go like Zeal and then build Infinity Edge, it'll have a lot of value there. Although Zeal plus Infinity Edge would still give you like 20% crit, because it would get doubled. Zeal plus Infinity, the current Infinity Edge, would still give you 20% crit, which is pretty close to what the current one is. So that's not even that much better of a scenario, I don't think. So like the only scenario where this is significantly better is a flat-out 100% rush Infinity Edge, which is still going to be trash on almost every champion outside of like maybe like Caitlyn or something, just because her base attack speed is so terrible anyways. But I still think that most champions are going to rush Stormrazor if that item is still at all viable. So yeah, this is really bad. If they took it back to the 250% crit, that would start making more sense, right? Then you would be getting double that damage that I talked about. Then you'd be getting like, you know, 47.5% or whatever. What did I say? It was like 27.5 extra damage on that crit. Then you'd be getting what, like basically 55 extra damage on the crit. And if you look at 55 divided by 400, now we're talking. It's like, okay, you're losing, you know, 11.5% efficiency off of, so like current Infinity Edge plus Zeal item versus new Infinity Edge plus Zeal item, you're losing the 10%, right? Crit, from what we talked about. You're only getting 50% crit instead of 60%. That was a loss of about 12% gold efficiency on the item. Now, if you had that, if you had the 250% crit like it used to have, you would be doing 13.7% more damage on your crit versus the current iteration of that item versus a 50 armor target, so versus a squishy target. So that's where it could start getting valuable, right? You're like, okay, against squishy targets, you know, I'm gaining 2% here. I'm losing, you know, 12% efficiency, but I'm also gaining about 14% more damage. So this might be an item worth getting second if they have mostly squishies on their team that are going to have 50 or less armor. It's still going to be sketchy against 100 armor targets, which are like mid-range targets. It's like people who get like a ninja tabby or something plus their base armor and their runes. It's still going to do less, right? Because then it's only going to be whatever that number was that I said before. It was like 13 extra damage or whatever. It's only going to go to like 7 or 8% extra efficiency or extra damage at the cost of 11% efficiency. I've been throwing around a lot of numbers. You probably got lost in there somewhere. Bottom of the line is bad. This is bad. This is not going to be that much of a boost. It will be an incremental boost against really low armor targets at 2 items. A very small incremental boost. But you're going to be losing a lot of efficiency on your item in order to get that boost. At 3 items, it's definitely worse. At 1 item, if you just rush Infinity Edge flat out, it's way better. But that's still going to be a bad option. Storm Razor's still going to be better. So, pretty disappointing. I think they could very safely take it back to 250% and be fine. I don't even think, like I said, it wouldn't even be that much better than the current version of the Infinity Edge. It would be worse against tanks, and it would be worse at 3 items. So, something to think about. Okay, Last Whisper is actually a pretty big buff. But this is also going to buff Assassins. So this is going to buff Zed and Talon quite a bit. So you're going up to 20 attack damage and 20% armor pen. So if a target has 75 armor, this is going to give you about 600 gold value now off of Last Whisper. So you're going to get 700 gold value at 20 AD, and I assume 1 flat armor pen is 40 gold value. That's what it used to be. Remember, flat armor pen is better than lethality because it's always 1 armor. It doesn't scale up to level 18 to deal with 1 armor. So if you thought lethality was bad, you should go back in time to the days of flat armor pen on things like Ghostblade. That was real bad. But anyways, so I think that this is definitely worth purchasing. So if somebody has like 80 armor or so, remember it's total armor now. They changed it. It's not bonus armor. It's total armor. So a lot of champions are going to have around 50 armor just, you know, normally with their runes. Even squishy champions, runes plus their base armor. I mean, if we look at Vayne even right here, right? You know, around level, I don't know, let's say level 9. She's going to have 46 armor, right? And she's going to take like 5 armor from her runes, likely, for the landing phase. So at level 9, she's going to have 50 armor without buying a single piece of armor. So this is basically like if somebody just gets Ninja Tabby or something for that 30 extra armor, it would easily put them at 80, even a squishy champion, and that would make it worth it. Because right now, this would give you 1,300 gold value. If you get just a handful of extra armor penetration, so if they have... remember, it's percentage based. It's 20% pen. So if they go up to 80, have 80 times 0.2 times 40, that would take the value up to 640 plus 700 would take us up to 1340. So it's getting pretty close. You know, somewhere between like 80 to 1,000 is going to be your, or to 100 rather. Let's just try 100 out here. So 100 times 0.2 times 40, 800, 700. Yeah, that's it. So that would give you a 1,500 gold value. The new price of the item is 1,450. So it's basically somewhere around, you know, 90 to 100 armor. This would be a break-even point. So it's still not going to be something that you want to rush all the time. But yeah, if people are starting to get like Ninja Tabby on your team, then that can very easily become worth it. And it's obviously very good against tanks. And then it builds into some other helpful items. These items are pretty good. I mean, Lord Dominic's plus Mortal Reminder are good items. It's just that Last Whisper itself is trash right now. It's only 10% total armor and 10 attack damage. So if you look at the gold value of this, it's an abysmal 26% gold efficiency without the pin. So they would, the enemy would have to have 238 armor right now for this item to even reach 100% gold efficiency, versus the new version of it is going to reach gold efficiency at somewhere around like 95 armor. So it's a much, much better break point. And then that'll allow you to segue up and get into Lord Dominic's area. So how will this affect AD carries? I mean, we'll see. This might become a reasonable option on champions that don't get a ton of crit, I guess. Like maybe Draven, if he's going for like a Stormrazor Bloodthirster build, he could now actually go Last Whisper as a second item. Obviously on like Zed or Talon, it's going to be a pretty reasonable option, maybe after you get your Dustblade and your Ghostblade. I don't know if it's going to be better than Cleaver. It'll probably depend on the matchup, but that could certainly be worth something considering now that your Last Whisper is not going to be complete trash, especially against tanky champs. So be worth considering, maybe as like a fourth item if some champions complete their Trinity of Infinity plus Rapid Fire plus Static Shiv, then they could get this as a fourth item again. Might be really handy. They're gonna, of course, in that scenario, they have to get rid of Stormrazor, or just nobody's gonna go for that synergy, the static plus Rapid Fire plus Infinity Edge. No one's gonna get that because they're gonna have to start off with Stormrazor. So it's probably still gonna be something like Stormrazor, Rapid Fire, Infinity Edge, or something like that. And then after that, you're probably going to want to get Static Shiv rather than Last Whisper. So anyways, what does all of this mean? Ran through a ton of numbers there, a ton of strategizing. Number one, they have to get rid of or significantly nerf or rework Stormrazor. It's just too good. Everyone's going to have to rush that item, and it just makes certain champions bad because if it all comes down to who has the best first hit, because that's what Stormrazor works with. So who has the best first hit most of the time? It's going to be Jhin a lot. Or it's going to be people, who else abuses that? Well, right now we have people that don't even use it, right? So we've got like Vayne, Ezreal, and Lucian being very strong right now as sort of a reaction against Stormrazor. And that's because they have much better 2-item power spikes. Because Stormrazor's good as a single item power spike, but then it's like your second item, what are you going to get? A lot of champions might get like a rapid fire cannon or something, and that's going to be pretty trash compared to something like, hey, thanks, Asurai, I appreciate it, compared to something like Vayne's Blade of the Ruined King plus Ginsu's Rageblade, or Ezreal's Iceborne Gauntlet plus Mirror Mana, or Trinity Force plus Mirror Mana, or Lucian's Blade of the Ruined King plus Black Cleaver, just and how his kit functions with those items. So we'll see. Lucian might be a candidate for wanting to get that Stormrazor that I talked about, because it says on attack, not on hit. I don't know if his double shot would refund more mana or not, but I don't know. Crit still feels kind of bad on him. He might be someone who actually would really like to get the new Last Whisper item after his Blade of the Ruined King plus Black Cleaver. I don't know. He might still want to go into just crit stuff, like Infinity Edge plus something. But anyways, I don't think this is going to influence the meta at all, really. If they nerf Stormrazor, and maybe they drop the price of these Zeal items by like 100 gold or something to make them more reasonable, 2,700 gold. I'm pretty sure they used to be 2,600 back in the day. That might be a little far. I think 2,700 would definitely make them a bit more appealing. Infinity Edge, they need to make it the 250%, or they need to make it 3,200 gold. One or the other, I think, would make this more appealing. They could throw an extra like 5 AD on there. That might help a little bit. But I think lowering the cost down to about 3,200 would probably be reasonable. If they did 3,200 plus 250% damage, I think that would be generous, because I think AD carries are in such an abysmal place right now because there's so many other roles that are so good at what they want to do. I think you could get away with doing something like that, especially if you don't lower the cost on the Zeal items. So anyways, if they nerf Stormrazor and if they bring down these costs, then we might see stuff like Caitlyn, Xayah, Jinx. Maybe some of those can creep back into the meta a little bit. Vayne, Ezreal, and Lucian are all very strong right now, though, so it's speculative. But yeah, I don't really see virtually anybody benefiting from this. Maybe, like I said, maybe something like Ashe, who might want to get back to old Essence Reaver plus Hurricane plus Infinity Edge. It's possible. I was going to do an Ash guide tonight, but I'm going to have to think about this tomorrow and do the Ash guide tomorrow because I just realized they changed all these items like an hour ago. And I was like, oh, I got to figure this out or I can't even make an 80 carry guide. So we'll see. So kind of bad news. You know, Phantom Dancer's bad. Essence Reaver is basically what it once was. And it never really was used very much back then. Shojin is basically what the current Essence Reaver is, which nobody uses that outside of like some Lucians that don't know how to itemize. And, you know, I think maybe Riven sometimes uses it. There's like a couple of champs, like Renekton sometimes likes it. Like there's a couple of champs that like it. I think Jax is starting to use it again. Maybe. No, he's using Gunblade? Maybe he was using Essence Reaver. I don't know. There's a handful of champions that use like the current Essence Reaver, so it's losing the mana. Not going to matter on Renekton. Probably not going to matter on Jax. So there'll be a handful of champions that use it, but basically I just don't think this is going to shake anything up. I think it's going to be the same deal. I think it's just going to be Vayne not building crit items. It's going to be Ezreal not building crit items and Lucian not building crit items. Then occasionally you might see Draven. Draven's flexible enough. You know, he's probably still going to want Death's Dance. He's probably, if they don't nerf, why do I always blank out on that item? If they don't nerf Stormrazor, he's probably still going to want Stormrazor most of the time. And then sometimes he might want, a lifesteal item like Death's Dance or Bloodthirster or something like that. I don't think it's going to change his items that much. Yeah, I just don't think it's going to change that much. I was excited before about some of the prospects they did. Like, they were taking Static Shiv up to, like, 50% attack speed, which I thought would have been pretty spicy. But, yeah, these changes are just looking like a much worse version of what the 80 carry items used to be. Not much worse, but the meta has changed so much. Like I said, enchanters don't have their really good Ardent Censer anymore. Fleet Footwork is not as good as the old... whatever drain item was, lifesteal item. So I don't know. We'll see. But anyways, I expect probably, you know, if this goes through, I expect it to still be a lot of Lucian, Ezreal, and Vayne all the time in solo queue, and those are probably going to be the best ones, with Ezreal and Lucian being far above the rest. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Be sure to leave that like and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.